virus. As the president has a closed-door meeting about the issue, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer have laid out a list of demands that they say should be in any economic package. It includes paid sick leave, bolstering unemployment insurance, and, quote, widespread and free testing for the coronavirus. Joining us now is a member of the House Financial Services Committee, Congressman Andy Barr. Great to see you, Congressman. So,
David, good to be with you.
We are in an election year. I don't have to tell you, probably people are already promising everything in the moon to voters. Now with this, I'm just thinking that there's no way anybody's going to say no to it. Does anybody have the gumption to say when some Democrats are offering packages that cost hundreds of billions of dollars, will anybody in the Republican Party say no?
I think so, and we need to take action. Obviously, we need to take the right action, but we don't need to politicize this situation. Obviously, we had a bad day. 7.8% decline in the Dow, the largest decline since the financial crisis. And look, the collapse in oil prices had a lot to do with this, in addition to fears about the coronavirus. But we should not politicize this issue. This is not something that President Trump created. This is something that actually was created in communist China, and it obviously spread to other countries. And I would just compliment and applaud this administration for taking very decisive, aggressive action. This is a whole of government approach. The Vice President and his team and Dr. Fauci at the National Institutes of Health, they have been on top of this from the beginning. And remember, the president took bold action right away to impose a travel ban from China and Iran in the beginning, issue a level 4 travel advisory, and then, very impressive, work with the FDA to lift some of the restrictions on the availability of testing. And now we're seeing not only the state and academic labs testing, but also now the commercial labs are coming on board. And so that is a credit to this administration's decisive action. This is a whole of government approach.
Yeah, Andy, it's Scott Martin. You mentioned, you laid out the work that we have to do with respect to, say, health insurance companies, vaccines. We've talked about even working with maybe some of the recovered folks, of which there are many, by the way, and maybe getting some antibodies from them and then working up a serum, because you're going to wait a while for the vaccinations. What is the time frame on getting all this stuff lined up with aligning everything with insurance companies to make sure that, as you mentioned, with testing and eventually the vaccinations, that folks will have this stuff covered on their insurance policies?
Well, as I said, it's a whole of government approach, and we had a briefing including Seema Verma and Secretary Azar, and they are working on that right now. And what I would say is the timetable, it's very, very impressive in terms of the expedited pace that we're seeing. It is a collaboration between the private sector and CMS and CDC and NIH and HHS, all of these healthcare agencies at the federal level in the Trump administration. But what they're saying is that the private sector already has, the pharmaceutical companies already have therapies in active clinical trials, both in China and in the United States. And we're only about a month to 6 weeks away, they say, from a vaccine in an active clinical trial. What a contrast to the Speaker's proposal of more government and criticism of these life-saving, life-improving, innovative companies in the private sector that really will be our saving grace in this.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but to the point about what Nancy Pelosi is talking about, is she requesting additional funds in addition to the money that's already been agreed to and signed off on by the president for things like expanding unemployment insurance?
You know, it sounds like it. It's only in Washington where politicians like the Speaker ask to spend more money when we literally just appropriated over $8 billion last week. Now, look, I voted for the package, but we certainly don't need to be spending more money before we actually exhaust the money we just appropriated.
Congressman, you began your comments saying we shouldn't be politicizing it. And from the perspective of the other side of the aisle, you've spent a considerable portion of your time on air now politicizing it, basically defending the administration, which is fine, but is neither here nor there in terms of what people want to know you're going to do and what we are collectively going to do. And I find it kind of flabbergasting that you begin that way and then go on to a partisan perspective. You can criticize Nancy Pelosi all that you want legitimately, but we are looking to you, because we are a collective in this society, for collective answers about what is currently a panic. It may be an unjustified panic. It may not be epidemiologically legitimate, but it is happening. And we need to know what you're going to do, not just amen chorus and Trump's great and Pelosi sucks.
All right. Go ahead, Congressman.
Well, look, it was a bipartisan bill that we passed, and we did take a bipartisan approach to the emergency supplemental legislation. I'm merely pointing out that we don't need a partisan approach to this. We need to give credit where credit is due, and certainly the Congress in a bipartisan way deserves credit for appropriating the funds to expedite some of these therapies and the vaccines and bringing them to market. And the administration deserves credit for obviously taking the administrative action to allow the FDA to expedite these therapies and the vaccine development that's happening and expediting the testing kits. So I'm not politicizing the issue, but what I would say is we don't need to have a situation where the Speaker of the House is asking for more spending when we literally just appropriated over $8 billion in response to this.
Congressman, we got to go, but I have to ask very quickly. Some people think Congress may shut down. We have Congressman Collins, Doug Collins. We have Senator, is it Senator Rubio or Cruz? Cruz, excuse me. He's self-quarantined. What happens if more of your colleagues in Congress declare that they have coronavirus or were exposed to it?
Well, look, I mean, it may be the case that Congress takes a break and that we, if several of our members can't be here, that we step away. We're hearing that might be the case. Okay. But look, the risk remains relatively low for the American people to contract the virus. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't take all the precautions that we need to,
Gotcha.
including in the financial sector. And you're seeing the regulators take some pretty decisive action
Congressman
today.
Andy Barr, I've gone over time to talk to you, but it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here.
Good to
really
talk to you as
appreciate
well.
it. Well, 6 states are set to vote tomorrow.